Thanks, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's staying safe here this winter. And I know doing virtual meetings isn't all what we anticipated here for the winter of 2021, but here we are nonetheless, and we're going to make the best of it. So to kick the party off here today, we're going to start with Dr. Scott A. Shearer. Dr. Scott received his formal training in agricultural engineering from the Ohio State University and was awarded a BS, an MS, and a PhD degree in 81, 83, and 86. Currently serves as a professor and chair of the Food, Agricultural, and Biological Engineering at the Ohio State University. His current research activities include autonomous multi-vehicle field production systems, unmanned aerial systems for remote sensing, yield monitor development and testing, and the evaluation of precision seeding technologies, and modeling of current and future field machinery systems, including logistics and compaction. I was fortunate enough back in January as part of the CCA conference. Scott was on and made a presentation, and I thought, geez, this is a pretty cool guy and doing some pretty neat stuff, and I thought it'd be a great fit for a grower meeting. So one of the advantages of doing virtual type meetings this year is we're able to cast our net a little wider in terms of gathering speakers from cross border or different parts of the world. So we're sure happy to have Scott with us and look forward to his presentation here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Well, thank you very much, Greg. I appreciate the introduction. Let's see. Am I able to share my screen here? I don't know whether Kristen, can you give me host capabilities or?
You should have it now.
Oh, there we go. Fantastic. All right. So hopefully everybody sees my, at least my first slide up. This is going to be a pretty quick, somewhat hard-hitting view into the future, if you will. And I'm going to hit on a lot of different things. I realize this group, potato and vegetable growers, but there's a lot of things that are going to impact you. I only show this slide just to get everybody thinking about GPS, which kind of started all this tech in agriculture, was first operational in 1993. And I don't think people realize when we think about technology in agriculture, it's really been around quite some time. And I like kind of reminding people of our past. Ag came on the scene, obviously, with multi-product variable rate application. One of the first systems they patented was in February, well, this is a February 1996 advertisement, but their patents go back to that time as well. And so again, that's what kind of kicked off this whole area we know as digital or precision agriculture. I show this because I think it's pretty interesting. This was showed at the last Agritechnica show in Germany. This is John Deere's, what they call their command cab. And what I want to point out is things are changing very rapidly. And if you look at the interior of that cab, there's really two monitors for tracking the progress of field operations for the operator of the machine. No steering wheel, if you think about things. We got automated end of row turns, we got auto steer. But this is kind of a look to the future in terms of what's going to happen. The operator of that piece of equipment is going to become a babysitter at best. They're going to monitor the process and the progress, and they're going to be there to intervene if anything occurs. Precision planting. I like talking about this company because it was a family-owned business, kind of started up out of the middle of Illinois, that really changed the data space in agriculture. And you know, today the technology is pretty phenomenal on planters, but it was giving the producers the ability to visualize what was going on with planting operations while they were sitting in the cab of the tractor, and they could do something about it. And that is this issue of singulation, where farmers used to be okay with 85, 90% singulation. Today, if it's not 99.9%, there's something wrong, and they're going to turn around and stop the machine and figure out what's going on. Data generation is pretty substantial today. Lower right-hand corner is a seeding map. And so essentially we have the capacity to locate or XY locations of every seed we put in the ground today. Upper left or the upper center image there was an applied downforce. And we did a compaction study a few years back. You'll see the diagonal green stripes in the field. Well, those were the traffic events from the compaction. And so now we have downforce giving us feedback in terms of what's going on with compaction in our fields. Today, farmers in North America are generating about a half a kilobyte per corn plant per growing season. People look at me like I'm an idiot, and I understand that. So I came up with kind of a reference for everyone. If you're getting a half a kilobyte per corn plant per growing season, that's like an acre of your ground sending you about 9,000 email messages per growing season. So think about how much data we're generating. By the way, with unmanned aerial systems, we think there's going to be a 10x rate. In other words, we're going to have 10 times that. And it's going to really ramp up our data in the space. I show this because technology is a wonderful thing, and we do some pretty crazy things at Ohio State. High-speed planting. This was the Case IH planter we're pulling with a quad track, 16-row planter. But please note, upper left-hand corner, we planted it up to 18 miles an hour. Now, please, as producers, don't do this. But the other thing is, if you get into high-speed planting situations, you're concerned about 8 or 9 miles an hour, don't even give it a second thought. We took this to yield 203 bushel an acre corn, regardless of what speed we were planting at. And so again, I'm just trying to get producers to think about how technology is going to change what they're doing. Today, when you buy a John Deere tractor, John Deere sprayer, John Deere combine, whatever the case may be, it comes internet connected. In other words, you turn the key on the machine and data is going to the cloud. A whole host of telematics capabilities, but this is kind of what's driving this whole data space. Estimates that I've seen place the quantity of data in some of these data repositories, and we can call them cloud storage locations, data warehouses, whatever you want to term these, but up to about 30% of the data going in these, at least in the future, will likely be coming from agriculture. And so agriculture is a big player in the data space. This is an AWS data center just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I like taking this picture, get people to thinking about when AWS buys file servers, they don't get all the bells and whistles. They get exactly what they need, and they can secure these data facilities. The other thing is, data is going to be backed up in 3 different geographic locations. AWS says if there's a natural disaster in one of those locations, you're back up and operational within 30 seconds. And so the redundancy in these systems, the security and the privacy in terms of data is pretty amazing. Coming on the front now, a whole host of these internet connected in-situ crop sensors. You know, what I'm saying is, if you're not using some of these soil moisture sensors and you're irrigating, you're probably costing yourself money by not tracking soil moisture levels and scheduling irrigation. The CropX sensor is a pretty good indication of that. The Teralytic sensor is going to be giving us soil fertility states on a recurring basis. And then the other thing that I want to point to are some of, and DTN is one of them, but some of the weather stations that are beginning to be populated on a lot of farms. This is DTNs from a few years back, but I'm saying today that the DTN probably knows more about weather in the Midwestern part of the US than the National Weather Service does, just because of the number of these weather stations. Internet access is going to continue to plague rural America, and specifically it's going to hamper the development of agriculture, in my estimation. When we look at broadband definitions, depending on whether it's fixed or mobile, 25 megabits per second up, 3 megabits per second down. Left-hand side, 200 kilobits per second. That's not even enough bandwidth to move data from a tractor to the cloud. And again, I want to put things in perspective. The right-hand side, 10 megabits per second. This is what is required for real-time video. And I'm going to come back and talk about real-time video because there are some things that are going to happen coming up. They're going to change the way we view agriculture. By the way, this was the FCC's maps from 2017. 3 or 4 competing technologies. Everybody thinks 5G is going to save the day. That's not going to happen in rural America for some time. Microsoft has been advocating for this white space. They're using some of the bands in between TV stations for internet connectivity. Carlson has some wireless technologies that have come out. Legato, kind of a reconstitutionalized light square. If anybody remembers some of the controversy going back a number of years with L-band corrections for GPS receivers. Legato has surfaced again as a possible solution to this. And again, I'm talking about high-speed broadband internet access. The one that I think is kind of interesting is following Elon Musk and Starlink and his low orbit satellites, suggesting there anywhere from 50 to 100 megabits per second. So again, competing technologies, it's going to be interesting to see which one wins out. But I can assure you, one of these technologies is going to be essential for the future of agriculture. Looking a lot at unmanned aerial systems, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing at Ohio State, but I'm going to kind of keep it pretty high. We've been using this Air Environment Quantics. It's a vertical takeoff and landing. We can map about 400 acres on a flight. By the way, that's a racing drone following the Air Environment. But we're learning now to manage this data a little bit better. I talk a lot about red edge. In this case, we have in the right image, we have this 0N treatment. This happens to be a cornfield. This is about V12. But if you look in this RGB image to the left, you do not notice that nitrogen deficiency. And really, it manifests itself in terms of the chlorophyll content of the plant. The real issue is going to be how do we manage this data and how do we extract actionable information? What's coming on the stage right now is artificial intelligence. And I use this as an example. The young man on the left is learning to pour a glass of milk, and certainly he poured a glass of milk. Unfortunately, I don't know about his efficiency in terms of getting the milk in the glass. The next young lady, the second inset image, she's mastered getting the milk container over the glass, but obviously she hasn't quite figured out when it's time to tip the milk carton back up to stop the flow. Young lady in the orange, doing a great job of pouring a glass of milk, and she's mastered how you stop pouring the milk. And then the young lady on the extreme right-hand side, pouring from a different carton. My point in all this is, just as children learn to pour a glass of milk, we have machines learning to make decisions in the field. And this is where it gets pretty interesting and exciting. We've been flying unmanned aerial systems with stingers on them. These are multi-rotor, and we drop camera heads down into the plant canopy. I'm going to talk about a corn plant and soybean plants, but the technology that we're using today is what I'm going to call nickel dime technology. We're using Raspberry Pis. These are PCs on a chip. They're about $35. The cameras are about $27. We have this camera head that we've built. It has two cameras pointing up at a 45-degree angle, two cameras pointing down. We take pictures as we drop this down into the canopy and as we withdraw it from the canopy. I want to remind everybody, a lot of the plant stress begins in the lower reaches of the canopy, and then it makes itself up to the top of the canopy. In the case of diseases, we're looking for those lesions on the top side as well as the bottom sides of leaves. This is an example. We're building a corn library looking at nitrogen deficiencies, gray leaf spot, northern corn leaf blight, and corn borer. All of these images have distinct differently characteristics, and we're using artificial intelligence and again, training machines to look at those images and do the classifications. In some cases, it's taking us 4.5 days to do the initial training. We're using convolutional neural networks. I get into a lot of discussions about it, but all the high-tech companies are creating these neural network classifiers. What we're doing is stripping out the 2 layers of output nodes and then retraining those to agricultural applications. This is the Raspberry Pi that I mentioned. Again, very low-cost hardware. This is something kind of interesting. The Jetson Nano, which is NVIDIA's. If anybody's following NVIDIA, maybe your children are gamers, but it's all about graphical processing units that have high throughputs. This is a $99 GPU. And the way we're using it is we put it in this camera head, we fly over a field, and we process the data as we fly. We're able to process about 35 images a second, and we can classify whether or not and even what types of weeds we see in those images. And so this is another drone application where we can actually go out over a field and map the weed infestations, the weed pressure, and even the types of weeds that we're seeing within those fields. This is done in near real time. This is not the sort of thing where we fly back, download a bunch of imagery, process it, and about 10 days later, come up with a stitched image that doesn't really give you any actionable information on what to do. By the way, this is kind of a research capacity here, but we're able to do this real time in the field. We're training our neural network classifiers in the field in the future. More than likely, that's going to be a subscription type service. In other words, when your machine goes to the field, I don't care whether it's a boom sprayer, an air blast sprayer, a drone-based sprayer, more than likely the intelligence is going to be uploaded before you go to the field, and it's going to depend upon the growth stage of the crop as well as some local weather conditions. And these things will be trained to be looking for specific insect infestations, I'm going to say diseases that manifest themselves with lesions on crop leaves and the like. This is where things get kind of interesting. We're seeing about 35 companies worldwide that are beginning to market some form of autonomous vehicle, okay, autonomous tractor, if you will. I think things are going to change markedly when some of these come into the mainstay. This is Xavier. This is AGCO's small autonomous tractor. And the thought is that there's going to be swarms of these vehicles. This is a single one-row planting unit. And so again, begin thinking, these could be IC engines, these could be electric, internal combustion engines or electric. This one is one of my favorites, and I think you need to be paying attention to this company. This is Swarm Farm out of Australia. They're building fully autonomous sprayers. And the uniqueness of these sprayers, let me turn that down a little bit. The uniqueness of these sprayers is the cost of spray application, exclusive of whatever the herbicides are, is somewhere between about $1 and $1.50 an acre. They do not sell these machines. They lease them to farmers. There's a technician that comes out and sets up the farm and the field, and then it's up to the machine to take care of what's going on in the future. A company to pay attention to, this is out of the Midwestern part of the US, is Sabanto. They've gone into autonomous operation. They're doing some tillage operations, but they did quite a bit of seeding last year as well. It's a very interesting time in terms of where things are headed. Here's a great company, Echo Robotics. This is for weed control. And again, we're going to see these in all kinds of horticultural crops. But please notice they're using microsprays and artificial intelligence just to spray weeds. They're able to reduce herbicides in a lot of these see and spray type applications by 90 to 95%. And so again, we think of the ramifications of that as we move towards the future. Another company, this was purchased by Blue River, is See and Spray, or Blue River, I'm sorry, was purchased by John Deere, but this is another company where you're using artificial intelligence to identify weeds and then just spray individual weeds. So again, it's a very interesting time. Deere is trying to make this work on a 120-foot boom sprayer at 15 miles an hour. So again, it's a wonderful time. I'll kind of round out with this one. This is Zasso, a different approach towards weed control. And there's a lot going on here, but the best way I'm going to characterize this is they're using high voltage currents to essentially control weeds. My understanding is they're using about a 25,000 volt potential, so there is some worker safety concerns here, but on the other hand, some of their controls are pretty effective in terms of grasses and some other broadleaf weeds. This one I'll kind of conclude with. We keep thinking about the 55-pound limitation on unmanned aerial systems. This is Velodrone out of Germany. I think John Deere has partnered with this company, but please note they got about 60 gallons of spray capacity on this drone. Again, this is an electric drone. Times are changing very quickly. I'll leave everybody with this one, what I call the Gartner hype curve for ag tech. The farm press comes out, some of these technologies come out, everybody gets excited about them, then we go into this trough of disillusionment because they didn't work quite as they should have. Then farmers begin to figure out how to use the technologies, and we get out here on this plateau of productivity. Auto steer now, most of you recognize, is not an option on a John Deere tractor. And when you buy that tractor, you've essentially paid the unlock fees and you have access to auto steer. And so again, the question is, where do you adopt some of these technologies? I keep saying on this slope of enlightenment is where you're going to make money. When you get out here, you're going to have to adopt the technology to remain competitive. So with that, I'll stop there and see if there's any questions I might be able to answer. Might have been a little too fast there. Questions, thoughts?
Yep, no, I'm here, Scott. That was great. Yeah, some of this technology is almost overwhelming, right? We got so much coming at us, and the key is figuring out what's applicable and how to use it. I guess we had a couple questions, and I think you kind of basically alluded to the one. Just what's your thoughts here on, the past trends obviously is equipment's been getting bigger, right? More horsepower, wider tillage implements, bigger capacity, right? As the technology becomes more adaptable and probably the price point goes down, I'm assuming the trend is going to shift towards more smaller units to accomplish the same task and with focus on things like less compaction and environmental impact. Is that fair to say?
I think you're exactly correct. And I want to point to Sabanto as being one of those companies that realizes that small might be better. Okay. By the way, their business model right now is farming as a service, and so there's a lot of producers out there going, "Gosh, how do I ever capture this technology and begin using it on the farm? I'm going to need a computer scientist or electrical engineer in order to get these systems operational and keep them operational." But the other side of the coin is, I think there's going to be a lot of services provided in the future, and just as some of our retailers provide pesticide application services, we're going to see some other companies spring up that are going to be providing these farming as a service type business models. I think you're 100% correct. Once we automate the equipment, we see a significant reduction in gross vehicle weights. And I think that's going to translate into much better soil health, probably better infiltration rates into some of our fields, given the fact that we're not consolidating the soils, and we're probably going to see it reflected in higher crop yields as well once we're able to remove that high horsepower, high gross vehicle weight equipment.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the other things I think is going to be somewhat important is this high speed or shift towards high speed field operations as well. That's going to reduce gross vehicle weights. So
we had another question that came through here on the Q&A. Do you foresee data being traded for tech use? Data is worth something, and who owns the data you generate? I know there's a bit of concern with people about that, just about who you give access to your data and how that gets transferred around and what it's worth. Do you have any comments on that?
I'll make some general comments. When we look at how data is being managed today, in most cases, most companies maintain that farmers own the data that's being generated. Now, that's not universal, but I'm saying that's generally the accepted situation. However, when you click I accept your terms, in terms of whoever the service provider is, whoever the cloud storage is, whoever the telematics company is, in general, and I want to be careful here because this is not true of all businesses, but in many cases, you end up licensing your data to that organization, and they have quite a bit of latitude as to what they do with that data. There are some of these data aggregators that are beginning to pay farmers for data. Again, the question is establishing that value. Personally, I believe that data could have significant value when there's a land transaction. In other words, if a farmer sells or buys land, does historical data come with that land? And I think that's one of the ways that farmers might benefit the greatest in terms of the value of that data. I think there is going to be continuing down this road of situations where farmers are attempting to monetize data, but I also think that it's going to have to be aggregated data that's being monetized. Right now, the marketplace is trying to sort this out a little bit, but I understand and I respect the farmers' attitudes about they own their data, and if somebody's going to benefit from it, they ought to share in the proceeds of that. But I also want to caution people that without the analytics and without the aggregated data, there may not be value in those data sets. So just some thoughts on where we might be headed.
That's good. Yeah, no, that's an interesting idea about as land transfers, does data transfer with it? So I guess just quickly, you mentioned, or you brought up a bunch of companies that are doing work with the autonomous platforms. I guess the one personally I've heard the most about, or I've seen a few videos on that, is the DOT platform, which I believe is a Raven. Do you have any comments or any experience with that one at all?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'll talk about Raven in general. They either acquired wholly or at least controlling interest in two companies, Smart Ag, and Smart Ag was doing autonomous grain carts, which was kind of an interesting concept. And then also you mentioned DOT. I think these are Raven sees themselves, and everybody probably understands Raven, at least sprayer controllers, has a substantial amount of the market, whether it's being marketed, their components are being marketed through integration on existing product lines, or they're being added after the fact. Raven sees autonomy as one of their big areas in terms of future product lines and also a significant amount of income. The comment that I'll make in some respects is there's a lot of people in Silicon Valley that see this as a very viable business plan, although not all the time does startup companies coming out of the Silicon Valley appreciate some of the constraints that farmers are under. And so again, I think we're going to see some of these companies are going to be acquired by the bigger companies. I will assure you that when this starts to cut into market share on things like John Deere 8Rs or Case IH Magnums, rest assured the big companies are going to be in this just as well as anybody else. But I think the trend is once we automate, we'll see much smaller equipment, but we'll see many more pieces of equipment, and we're going to see equipment that operates 24/7 when it's reasonable to do so. Some things that farmers may not be thinking about is when you buy and I'm going to use a John Deere 8R, that tractor is probably going to have a 20,000 hour life. It's going to be used 500 to 600 hours a year, which means the full capacity of that machine is not going to be realized for 40 years. As we go to some of the smaller equipment, I'm predicting life cycles of about 7 to 8 years. And so that equipment's going to turn over a lot more quickly. And when you think about technical obsolescence or the next generation of equipment, farmers are going to be able to access that those technologies much more quickly as the equipment wears out, if that makes sense. So it's an interesting time.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thank you for your time, Scott. We appreciate you making some time for us, and you've got a lot of knowledge and experience that you were able to share with us this morning. So we really appreciate that, and go Buckeyes.
Go Bucks. If anybody has any questions, happy to expand on any of the concepts that I talked about. I know it was kind of a high level, pretty fast run through, but it'll give some people some ideas about where technology is headed. Definitely, no question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Greg. Appreciate the opportunity today.
Take care.
Take care.